And good morning. Welcome in. We are the Out of Bounds Show. We're brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your car and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent, any of the 82 counties in the state of Mississippi. Favrates.com to get a quote in 4 minutes or less. Morning drive this morning, driven by your next Ford F-150, Mack Hike Ford, I-55 North in Jackson. Pre-owned and new Ford F-150 trucks at Mack Hike Ford, I-55 North in Jackson. Welcome in our friend Jeff Duncan, NOLA.com columnist, author, longtime Saints NFL insider, and Jeff joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Jeff Duncan, how about that? How about those championship games yesterday, my man?
Yeah, Bo, it was great theater. I have to admit I was surprised at the Chiefs game. I was picking both favorites. Shows you what I know. Never doubt Patrick Mahomes, but still lived up to the hype both games, I thought.
What the big thing today is to criticize Dan Campbell, head coach of the Detroit Lions, that he was too aggressive during the game. You have been covering the NFL for a long time, and you've covered big moments and Super Bowls and NFC championship games and so on. Where did it land for you, Jeff?
Yeah, it's a good question. I know it's going to be the topic of discourse today, and I fall on the side of you don't change your philosophy once you get to the big moment. I think you kind of ride with what got you there. I can think of a couple other instances like that, Bo, involving the Saints. One, of course, right before the infamous NOLA no call. If you remember, the Saints had a first down, and on first down, so I think it was a little over maybe 2 minutes left, a little less than 2 minutes left. Sean Payton elected to try a pass with Drew Brees to Mike Thomas. They're two best players on offense, all pro players, and they failed to connect on a routine play, and it stopped the clock for the Rams and ultimately gave them time to come down and kick the tying field goal. But that's, they were looking to win the game right there and put it away. Same thing in that famous divisional playoff game against the 49ers with Greg Williams blitzing late and giving up huge explosive plays to Alex Smith and the 49ers offense. That's the way Greg Williams played all year. A lot of people would say play prevent. Greg Williams didn't believe in that. So he wasn't going to do that in those instances, and it cost the Saints. So you kind of live, if you're going to live that way, you're going to die that way at times, and you have to kind of be willing, I think, to live with the consequences, because I think in the long run you're going to win more often than you're going to lose. But there are going to be times where you have to grin and bear it, like yesterday with Dan Campbell.
Yeah, he's done. Look, you've been covering this league for a long time, and I grew up. The Lions were the lovable losers. I mean, Jeff, he's done a remarkable job with that franchise, Dan Campbell.
Right, and I think exceeded expectations by everyone, and had to build from the ground up, right? I mean, he came in, that organization had been just dilapidated. Internally, the roster was bad. I think they went 3-13 his first year, but he stuck to his guns and believed in the fundamentals that he learned from Sean Payton. I mean, I wrote my column over the weekend about it. Very similar rebuilding job to the way Sean Payton came in and resurrected the Saints franchise in 2006. Those were complete, startup operations to some degree, because you were changing a mindset and a culture, and that takes time. And I think what they've built in Detroit under Campbell, and even if he loses Ben Johnson, which it looks like he will, to the Commanders, I think they've got so much positive, apparatus in place that they'll withstand that loss and be just fine. They've got a lot of young talent, and he's done a remarkable job of getting people to buy in. There's going to be a lot of players in the league that want to go play for Dan Campbell, and that certainly wasn't the case, in the last few years.
Sure. No, that's a good point. Jeff Duncan, NOLA.com, Saints insider, wrote the book Peyton and Breeze, and as we have talked about many a times, it is an excellent book behind the scenes on the run that they made in New Orleans. And Jeff had all access, which is, I'm jealous, but it's a great book to read. I don't know if there's an off season, but pick it up and you'll love it. What impressed you the most, Jeff, about the 49ers in the second half yesterday?
Well, I think, staying the course, the mental toughness, the more I've covered the game, Bo, the longer I've covered it, the more that impresses me, what goes on between the ears more so than between the lines. And I think the mental toughness to not panic in the moment, to believe in what got you there and stick to your guns, that's hard to do in that moment, especially with so much pressure and so much stakes on the line. That's a good team they beat, man. Detroit played very well, and Detroit was dominating that first half. And you could tell, like, San Francisco was pressing a little bit, and then they just needed something good to happen. And once that switch flipped, you could see just how good a team that is. It's a very complete team, San Francisco. But also thought the young quarterback, I mean, he's wise and mature beyond his years. He made some big plays with his feet and mobility. Brock Purdy, I think, validated all the praise he's received this offseason. I think people keep wanting to label him because of where he was drafted, but you can see his maturity and why that offense believes in him, that team believes in him.
Yeah.
And that was a big moment for him in his career.
Man, he hurt him with his legs, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. And look, that's part of playing quarterback in this league now. Peyton talked to me about that a lot. I mean, I think when you see the way the league has gone, the defense, they're so athletic now. You don't necessarily have to be, Lamar Jackson. You just have to be someone like Brock Purdy that can scramble around. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is like that. Be able to make that third and long scramble and keep the chains moving. You have to have some level of mobility, and that's certainly what Brock Purdy has. I just think even though Jared Goff took the lines that far, and he's more of a classic drop back, and so is Matthew Stafford, and you can still win that way, I think it's becoming the exception now, and the rule is to have mobility.
Are you going out to Las Vegas?
I am not, and I wish I were because, as you know, we have the Super Bowl here next year, and so New Orleans will have a large contingent in Las Vegas, obviously evaluating the process. The actual Super Bowl host committee that runs the Las Vegas Super Bowls is being run by a New Orleanian, who worked at the New Orleans Sports Foundation. They hired him away because they'd never run a Super Bowl before in Las Vegas. They needed somebody with experience, and they went and got someone from New Orleans. So I think it'll be a lot of connections out there, a lot of ties as we get ready for 2025.
Wow. Okay. So the 49ers are favored. Here we go again with the Chiefs being the underdog, and somehow they've rallied around that, even though they're the Chiefs with Mahomes and Reed and Kelsey, now Taylor. But 49ers by 2.5. I know it's early, but as you handicap this one, what are you going one direction or another? How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to stick with the 49ers just because I think they're the more complete team. But I learned my lesson yesterday. You never count Pat Mahomes out. I mean, I did not expect him. I couldn't get out of my brain, Bo, that Christmas Day game against the Raiders where they just got dominated at home by the Raiders, and they just look so out of sorts. But it's a good lesson in adaptation and the strength of a coaching staff like Andy Reid has in place there, and great leaders like Pat Mahomes to continue to evolve as a team. Even that late in the season, that was Christmas Day, and they look really, really out of sorts offensively. They got it fixed, and they've been a different team in the playoffs, and they have a belief from all the confidence they've gained winning these big games. I mean, they'll be a tough out, but I just kind of feel like it's the 49ers' year.
Both tight ends are unguardable, right?
Yeah, great point. I mean, we saw 4 great tight ends yesterday, right?
Yeah, Laporta,
Andrews, Laporta.
Yep.
I mean, that position has become invaluable in the NFL, and we're seeing 2 all-timers in the Super Bowl, 2 of the best that ever do it. And I really think defensively, I was thinking a lot yesterday, to be honest with you, about Steve Spagnuolo. I mean, I think Saints fans forget
2012.
He was the Saints defensive coordinator for a year and was unceremoniously fired by Sean Payton. And that was one that Sean, I bet, regrets today. He sat out that year under the bounty suspension, and he didn't get to really know Spags, even though he hired him, and he fired him at the Senior Bowl after, he'd come back on board. And what the story I was told was that they were evaluating the 2012 defense, and Spagnuolo was saying, hey, we got to make these changes personnel-wise. This guy won't work in our system. This guy won't work in my system, blah, blah, blah. And finally, at one point, Peyton said, well, look, we won a Super Bowl with a lot of these guys. Maybe we need to change you out instead of the players. And he fired him. And I think that was an impetuous, kind of impulsive Sean Payton move that he made as a younger coach that he probably wouldn't make today. But it is remarkable that they have someone of that quality here on defense. And it really started a spiral defensively for years with Rob Ryan, and it led to a lot of bad Saints football, and it didn't have to be that way.
Oh, Jeff Duncan, columnist, NOLA.com, Saints Insider on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. So I made a note about that, about Steve Spagnuolo. And Jason and I talked about how he was the coordinator for 1 year in 2012. Then he had to go be an assistant head coach for the Ravens. That was a bad move by Sean. And Spagnuolo is really, you could make a strong argument, Jeff. He was the architect for the 2007 New York Giants defensive coordinator, right? And then now what he's doing, this may be his fourth Super Bowl if the Chiefs win. Could we make a strong argument that he's the most successful coordinator, regardless of side of the ball, in the 2000s in the NFL?
Oh, no question. I mean, that the Giants season, a lot of people believe it's one of the best coaching jobs in the history of the league. That defensive performance, especially in the Super Bowl, and I think what he's doing now with this defense, they're the strength of the Chiefs now, not the offense, and we saw it yesterday. So, yes, you have to say that he ranks right up there. And it amazes me the rush that we see in the league now. Everybody wants to hire young, up and coming. They want to catch lightning in a bottle. And you have really talented, proven guys like Steve Spagnuolo who will probably never get an opportunity to be a head coach.
Yeah, he's so good. And he's so overshadowed because of Mahomes and Kelsey and Reed. And we love offense, as you know. I mean, you write and everything you do, a lot of what we do is offensive driven. I mean, that's why we sit down with nachos and a Patron cocktail and watch the game. And I walk in this morning, and Jason, I'm like, Jason, Steve Spagnuolo should be the lead topic. I've been in here for 3 hours this morning. We've got Good Morning Football on the NFL Network, and we've got ESPN on, and it's all offense. And I get it, but it's just, I think you nailed it. He could have been, I think he's the MVP of the Chiefs.
Yeah, look what he's done with L'Jarius Sneed. I mean, there's a guy, I wrote about him a few years ago, Louisiana kid, North Louisiana. It happens, right? It happens in Mississippi, happens in Louisiana. There's so many talented players, and they slip through the cracks in the recruiting process, ends up at Louisiana Tech, gets drafted mid-rounds, and he's one of the probably 5 best cornerbacks in the league right now. He's going to get paid, and Steve Spagnuolo and his defense have really built around his ability to shut down. He's their Marshawn Lattimore. And, finding great athletes that fit his system, that's what he was trying to do that day with Sean Payton. And Payton didn't want to hear it, and I think he regrets that to this day.
That is a great story. Jeff Duncan on the Out of Bounds show. He wrote the book Peyton and Breeze, and Steve Spagnuolo was the defensive coordinator 2012, and that was the year Sean was suspended. And then Jeff just walked us through the story of Peyton firing him at the Senior Bowl, and got to be one of the biggest regrets, as successful as Sean was. When was the last time you talked to Sean Payton, Jeff?
A couple of weeks ago, maybe sooner than that, just about the Hall of Fame process. I always like to pick his brain about, I'm on the Hall of Fame committee, and always want to get his thoughts on some of the candidates as we're getting ready to elect the class of 2024. So talk to him, and I mean, just today, I'm getting ready to report this, so I'll break it on your show. It's not a big story, but he's hired away the Saints assistant director of college scouting, Cody Rager. And Cody is probably not well known to your listeners, but he is a integral person in the Saints building. He's basically Jeff Ireland's right-hand man.
Oh, wow.
If Jeff Ireland ever left, which he's done some interviews for general manager positions. That's who would be the head of college scouting with the Saints. And Peyton, as he's wont to do, plucked him away, and Cody's going to go work for Sean in Denver. And that's a big loss for the Saints because he's very well thought of, a rising star in the scouting community and getting a big promotion. So it's good for him and his young family.
Wow. Okay. Jeff Duncan, NOLA.com on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Sean takes a key piece of the puzzle from Mickey Loomis and Jeff Ireland and the New Orleans Saints. Well, let's go into this. So they're going to run it back with Dennis Allen, and we're going to see what they do on offense. And you and I text back and forth, and you were like, oh, no, he's coming back. I think they won 4 of 5 to end the year. But they had
correct
what I thought was, I think in my lifetime, the easiest schedule they'll ever draw. So I got to weigh this. The NFC South wasn't that good. I mean, Tampa Bay came on. They didn't face really, really tough QBs, either backups or rookies and so on. How much confidence do you have that running this back will get the Saints where they want to go, Jeff?
Yeah, look, I'm dubious, to be honest with you. I think by now we'd see more from what we're looking at, right? I mean, I think the schedule is something that matters. That gives context. When the Saints stepped up last year in class and played the Lions and the Rams of the world, they were competitive. I mean, I've written about that, Bo. I think they led in those games for a total of like 1 minute against the entire 5 teams they played that made the playoffs. I mean, it just, if you exclude the Bucks game they won. So they just were not competitive at all, and I think that matters. I mean, that's where the standard in the building, in my opinion, I don't know if I've told you this before, but I've been asked a lot about what's wrong, what do I think? And I think what we do in society these days when we find a problem is we want to be reductivist, right? We want to reduce it down to something simple, like it's Pete Carmichael's fault. That's it.
Right.
Or it's Derek Carr's fault. That we want to simplify it. It's not that simple. It's, in my opinion, when you lose 2 great leaders like Sean Payton and Drew Brees, generational talents at the most high-profile positions in the NFL, you lose a standard of operation that just is an immersive effect throughout the building. They held everyone in that building to a high standard, and it just gets lower. The bar, it's human nature. You have somebody that's kind of a taskmaster that holds you to a high standard in the building, holds you to a certain level of accountability, and they leave. Everyone exhales a little bit, and your performance goes down just a little bit. That's all it takes in the NFL. It's so competitive. There's so much on the line. The stakes are so high that everything gets lowered a little bit, and you end up 500. And that's what, in my opinion, has happened. It's not just Pete Carmichael. It's not just the quarterback. It's everything. And that's why it's so hard to fix. And that's why you have to have these generational leaders like Sean Payton in there. Sean Payton was a perfect fit for the Saints organization. Yes, he could be dictatorial. Yes, he could be crazy at times, but he was a visionary, and he understood the big picture as a head coach. And he understood more than just his brilliance with X's and O's. He was like a psychiatrist and understood how to motivate players and could get problem players like, guys like Mike Thomas or guys like Jeremy Shockey. He get them to play and operate within a system. And you see when he leaves the building, all that starts to fall apart. And so I just think it's much greater than just one thing, but ultimately it has to go back to the very top. And I'm not sure it's going to get fixed in one off season.
Do you think we've got a couple minutes here. Yeah. Jeff Duncan, NOLA.com. This is great. Is it fixable? Do you believe that Mickey Loomis, with all the success he's had, can get this right? Without a Sean or a Drew, like you're talking about, Andy Reid, Mahomes, Shanahan, Lynch,
I think they'd have to catch lightning in the bottle again, with a Drew Brees type quarterback or a Sean Payton type head coach. I think they'd have to do that. Otherwise, I think the track record speaks for itself. I mean, they look a lot like the teams that I covered before the Peyton Breeze era.
Yes.
And that is, like a lot of other teams in the league, you're going to be competitive, and if things go right, you get the breaks that year, you stay healthy, you win some of those 50-50 games, you make the playoffs, but you're not really a threat to win the Super Bowl. But you're in the playoffs, and you win a game maybe, and then when things don't go your way, you end up 7-10. You know, I just think that's the way it's going to be, and that's how most of the league is. And the days of the Saints being elite 13-3, I think are over.
I agree with you. All right, we'll leave it. Man, and you just described what happened in New Orleans. I'll take it locally here. And in college, our two big teams, Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Dan Mullen had that edge. He elevated the program at Mississippi State. He would F-bomb people and held people to a high standard. Some would say he was maniacal, but they did things that they had never done. And when he left, everybody just dropped their guard. You just described it perfectly, just a little bit, and lost a little bit of their edge. And I'll take it to here, even though we won't have them going forward. In the SEC West, when you're not one of the elite recruiters, you have to have all of what I just described. You see where I'm going, Jeff?
That's kind of what the Saints are, the Mississippi State of the NFL in a way, right? So you have to have that. And that's what Dan Campbell has brought to the Detroit Lions.
Yes.
Same thing.
Yes.
That edge that allows you to punch above your weight class.
Yes.
And Sean Payton did it for 16 years. And, and I think he got burnt out on it and needed a break. I know he did, and needed a break and walked away and didn't know how long it was going to take. And I think he would have come back here, as I've written, and the Saints did not want to bring him back. And I think that was a cardinal sin. I think they're going to regret that for a long time.
Wow. All right. I could do another 30 minutes, but our show's over. That was awesome. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Jeff Duncan, columnist, NOLA.com, author, Peyton and Breeze. And that was really good on the championship games and kind of where the Saints are headed or not headed as they go through this. Still, they're going through post Peyton and Breeze, just like Mississippi State, post Dan Mullen. Jeff Duncan, be good, man. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks for having me on, Bo. Take care, buddy.
Jeff Duncan, NFL insider, Saints insider, columnist, NOLA.com. Covered the game for over 30 years. That was good, the way he framed up kind of where the Saints were, what they've been going through, and where they're probably headed. Now, Saints fans may be throwing, beer cans in their living room or office. Maybe not beer cans, Diet Coke cans.
Yeah.
It's 10 o'clock in the morning after listening to that. But, hey, one thing about Jeff, he is, you don't always see this in this state. He calls it like he sees it. Heavy opinion. This is it. He's not scared to be critical. He will also give the Saints credit right?
Yeah.
But he will call them out, call a spade. And interesting. Okay. Senior Bowl's coming up in Mobile, too. We may hit that. Tomorrow we got Mike Detillier at 8:30. Guess who else we have tomorrow?
Who's that?
Justin Parker, new Mississippi State pitching coach who came in from the South Carolina Gamecocks. He's going to have to get Gerangelo and Dome and those guys going for Lamonis to punch his ticket and extend his stay in Starkville. We're on Spotify. Search Out of Bounds with Bo Bounds. See ya.